I'd like to say good evening and welcome, but I have to say, what with the world situation the way it is right now, I'm not really feeling it, the good evening bit. I don't mean that as like, I welcome you, the viewer, to whatever day you're lucky enough to watch this, or unlucky enough. And yeah, well, I'll be absolutely straight with you. It's a bit worrying and slightly depressing a time at the moment, and I'll be lying if I say to you that I am not in certain ways at the effect of it, which is a way of saying allowing it to bother me. So it is. So I'm afraid this is going to be kind of shot through with that, whether we like it or not. What we have here is Aaron's FMT Fender Telecaster flame maple top, and look at this beautiful thing. Isn't that pretty? Fender, what looks, I don't know, titanium, stainless steel, or probably titanium saddles there with the, what do they call them, compensated adjustment on each one, which looks okay. Although, funnily enough, the spacing down here on this one here is a bit, sorry, you can't see it very well. That one was a little bit, has to go there to be balanced, which is a little bit odd, but anyway, it's okay, it goes. So yeah, we've got this FMT Telecaster in for a setup, and it's one of those where I'm kind of, what was it? Too good for my own, no, something like that anyway. Damned by my own success or something. US made beastie look. Nice, beautiful made neck, and look at the grain in that. How delicious is that? Nice skunk stripe, pancake construction body, and yeah, limited edition. So yeah, what I mean by that is that Aaron got to play the Fender Strat that I set up the other day, or a little while back, and said, do that, I want that, do that to this, and sent this down. So it's great to have it here, and of course I'm nervous now whether or not I can duplicate such a thing. So the request on this from Aaron is to do the same kind of setup, Tusq adjustable nut, Tusq string tree if necessary. I think with this, the string tree, I can hear it pinging, and it does sort of scrape on the metal a little bit, but it's not the end of the world. But we shall see. So the question is, what's with this? Well, the first thing I've noticed on this guitar, maybe I can just show you the first thing. First of all, the action is set a little bit high at the moment, and I presume it's been set that high to make it as playable as it can be. Has a lovely feel all round to it. I'm not knocking the quality of the build, it's fantastic, but as you come up this, we've got a dead note on the 11th fret on the low E, or an unacceptably dead note. So that's going to need to be leveled out. Well, that was the first thing. The other thing, at the current height, which is too high, most of the frets, most of the strings seem to play okay. I haven't noticed any choking out on bends. However, it's not really a good idea to make that distinction right now, or kind of pronounce on that, because until I set the ideal action, I won't know. Now, the issue here is we do have a really nicely made bone nut, and I have to say the action here is very, very low. The problem with a nicely cut bone nut is that the minute we set an action lower, and particularly this D string here is worrying me, the minute I set that action lower, that's going to be marginal. So even though part of me says, look, if it's not that broke on the nut, don't fix it, the problem is when we get down to the sort of target height, we'll be dealing with a different sort of kettle of jelly babies. So what I'm going to do, first thing I'm going to do in this case, is I'm going to make some adjustments down and just see what we get to with this nut. I kind of, Aaron wants me to replace it with a Tusq adjustable, and I'm happy to do that, but I just get a little bit kind of nervous about, it's such a nice fitted bone nut stuff, but so I'm looking for good reasons to do it so I can feel a little bit less nervous about it. So other things to notice about this, the playing action, the relief in this neck is dead straight. I couldn't find any, it's not necessarily the way I would do it, but I can't find any, hardly any gap at all. Well, there's the fraction of the gap on that side. I mean, it's tiny, and almost none on that side. So it's okay. It's okay, and if there were more fret slap and buzzes around here, I would probably dial in a bit more relief. However, it's a balance between, well, put it another way, the strings need some space when they're moving, and the space is created effectively either by putting a curve in the neck, which gives them room to swing around where they move most, or aided by raising the action at this end higher. So you can have a high action here and a totally dead flat. In fact, you could have a dead flat neck with a high action down here. If you bring the action down here, then the flatness of the neck becomes a constraining factor, and you might need to find yourself adding in a little bit of relief. Looking at it the way it's playing at the moment, you have to kind of factor in if the player, the owner of the guitar, is comfortable playing it with this kind of straightness of neck. What I would probably do is start by lowering the action, check what happens to the clearance here, lower to our target action here, check the clearance there, leave the neck as it is, unless we come up with some problems that we need to then address. And I'll address them first with fret leveling, because we know we've got a fret there that's got to be taken down. And I'll also then be watching out for how does it need a tiny bit more relief in it. So it's a kind of to and fro kind of calculation. Here we've got nut, string, trees, 10s. These are 10 gauge. The difficulty of this guitar, what was quite interesting, because Aaron was talking about not feeling quite comfortable with these frets, and I played them a bit earlier on, and I found my fingers doing this thing of going over the top. Now, it's not very scientific, but when a little bit, you can hear these notes just singing a little bit, zinging, but I found the fingers pushing over the top. Now, that could partly be technique, but quite often I find that when you have very stiff strings, the stiffer the strings, the higher the frets help, if the frets are, when you're trying to push the bend sideways, because the bigger space there is between string and fingerboard here means the more meat of finger you can get pushing sideways on all of these strings, however many you use to bend, depending on your strength. Now, I've measured these. It's very difficult to measure fret height accurately with a sort of domestic calipers here, but this comes in repeatedly, and the way I tend to do it is I tend to measure it off these frets up here, because I can balance the caliper, either sides of this caliper on there, and I could make a little jig that allows me to put a right angle across the back. I could probably even screw in a right angle of something that allows me to rest it in the same way. But I take this, take down nothing. I basically rest it on the frets, hold it on both frets, keep it straight. It's slightly hard to do, actually. Hold it on both frets and then press down, and it's coming up consistently at 120, so 1 millimeter, 1.2 millimeters. Now that isn't excessively low, but I think it's around about the height where a 10 gauge string on a Telecaster starts to feel quite stiff. I've kind of measured these, and again, strings are very difficult to measure with calipers, and I'm going to check my email just to see if Aaron has come back to me with anything, to tell me whether there are any special, extreme gauges here or what. It could be a hybrid set. But so the combination of, what I'm finding is the combination of my fairly weak hands plus the medium height of the frets. I wouldn't say they're flat or low, they're medium, 1.2. That plus the stiffness of the strings makes it quite hard for me to bend them. Not just because it's hard, but because my fingers, rather than bend, my fingers sort of go over the top. But I think obviously that's what Aaron's used to. If this was my guitar, personally, with the longer scale, i.e. the Tele scale, I would probably be playing with 9s, but that's because of the strength in my hands, fingers isn't very great. But you know, a 9 gauge on a Telecaster feels stiffer than a 9 gauge on a Gibson scale. So, but this has come to me with what look like 10s on there. I'm also interested in looking at the way that the finish has gone up over the edge of the frets here prior to how they've been sanded off, because I'm always interested in the way they fret these, and sometimes it seems to me that they spray the fingerboard, keep the slots clear, then press the frets. But actually this has I think all the telltale marks of fretting first, followed by this is slight amber nitro, oh, not nitro, sorry, amber poly spray over here, and it kind of creates little reflected spots. So everywhere the finish rises up to rise up the fret, because obviously it coats the fret at the time, it creates a little shine, a little reflective curve, and that curve catches the light. And actually it does a funny thing, is it gives you the impression that there's a depression that the fret's sticking in, but in fact it's the opposite. It's reflecting because it's bending up towards you, and the light is kind of bouncing off it. As soon as it goes upwards, the light bounces off it. So yeah, so this I can also see, looking at the edge of the frets, I can see a sort of speckly pattern where I can see where the amber colour in the finish. It's funny, it looks like it's got like a metallic flake going up there, but this hasn't got any flake in it, so at least I don't think it has. No, I'm sure it's not a flake, a clear flake. That'd be quite interesting, a sparkly flake finish. But yeah, so but it definitely leaves a sort. It looks like a sort of tiger print, or you know, dogfish camouflage print along the edge, front edge. It might be just the way it's built up on the edge here, and then there's a bit of clear fret showing through. I don't know, but it's a funny little pattern. Anyway, it's a beautifully made thing, so I'm not complaining about that at all. Obviously, for a premium guitar like this, that is not great, particularly when you measure the action, whoops, and discover that it's actually quite high to begin with, or relatively high. No, I wouldn't say very high, but so we'll just have a quick look. Again, this is not scientific. This is a sort of an eyeballing game here, and I can tell you that is a whiff above 2. I'd say it's about 2.2 millimeters. Now for me, that's a bit higher than I'd want to be on, at the worst, on a Telecaster. And I say this because sometimes Telecasters have given me, I can't stand trying to get these things out when they don't want to come out. Telecasters sometimes have given me grief. It might be a purely psychological thing. So we've got 2.2 low E, 2.2, and then I'll just have a quick look across, and we're looking at about 2.1 on the A. Two, 2, two more, and then we're at 1.6, 1.5. Okay. Yep. Right, so they're a little higher than I would go to. So my aim would be to go from 1.5 across to 1.2. So I'm going to start that. So for this side, I'm going to, oh, these are American made, aren't they? So we'll use the, oh, they're slotted. So we use a slotted screwdriver. Yes, so, you know, what a state we're in. What a situation we're in, eh? God blimey. We are, as I adjust this guitar we are in a situation where two implacably opposed takes on a single reality are clashing, and in a way anyone with intelligence, I hope, can see, and I won't hedge it. Anyone, I believe, with intelligence, the mark of intelligence, in my opinion, is the ability to see that, in a way, the truth, what is strictly true or not, is probably less important than the implacability of the two opposing frames of reference or points of view. So, so you take, but the problem we've got, of course, is that making sense of this kind of complex thing, which involves multiple points of view, contesting points of view, each claiming to represent a kind of represent reality. The problem with that is that it's dangerous at the best of times, but I think it's even more dangerous now when such a huge swathe of our populations seem to have lost the ability to learn from holding multiple points of view at once, and I would call it synthesizing understandings from the ability to look at the whole situation and learn what the contesting, the conflicting different points of view, what the conflict tells us, rather than getting hung up on one, the one I believe in, and screaming for it to be right and preeminent. And that, unfortunately, is the root of all wars. Seems to be always done. It's always caused and always hinges on people aligning, or certain people aligning to one point of view and screaming that it's right and everyone else is therefore wrong, and everyone's implacable, the other side's implacable, intransigent, so on. Yeah, and so I heard some TV interview today where somebody said, it's not this, it's this, and a Russian ambassador of sorts, whichever it was going, "You are wrong," or some version of it. So ouch. Well, down at the target action, it's all a little bit zingy, and obviously down here we've got a congested spot here that isn't happy, and it goes more than one fret, but it's showing up really badly on the 11th. Okay, well, what was requested of me was the installation of adjustable nut, so I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to remove the strings altogether for this first bit. Let's have a close-up of the nut department. Now I have to work out first of all what nut we're dealing with, So I'm going to do some radius measuring before I get too far into this, but we'll slack off the strings for the time being. This is a lovely, beautifully fashioned nut, but my customer likes the adjustable Tusq nut that he has experienced on his, I think it was his brother-in-law's guitar. So far be it from me to stick with bone. Now the little string tree here, the Fender, typical Fender metal one. Of course, it has a classical Fender look, and for it to stay in place, it requires two little holes. One to place it, and the other one to hold it. So, if we just take a quick look at it, we can see that when we lift it out, there are two little holes side by side. Now, if we were, and I'm going to just demo this with a black one for a minute, if we were to replace it with a Tusq thingy, where have I put them? Tusq string trees. Nope, spare black ones currently not available. So I'll get it from this packet of new ones. Yeah, if we were to replace it with a Tusq string tree, actually the Tusq string tree is looking about the right size. In fact, we could probably, if we wanted to, we could probably replace using the original thing to keep the size. They're actually very similar anyway. But so I just want to show you that what we would get if we replace this. It's actually not long enough, but we'd use the longer one of these two here. Sorry, the shorter of these two, but it sits further into the thing. So we could fit that into there, and what we would find is that it goes in there and it leaves a fraction of the original hole just showing, but the point being is it's replaceable should you wish to go back. I think the diameter of these are very, very slightly different. Let's have a look on how this works with that one. Should you want to revert is the word, re-go backwards. Yeah, slightly different size. Let's see if I've got another screw that would do the same thing without encroaching the hole. It's quite an interesting little challenge to find one. Yeah, so we've got this situation where we've got implacably hostile systems or view frames coming up against each other, and it seems to be that there's no greater awareness in them, such that, you know, enough to there you go. That's actually a good alternative. So I'm going to hold these two off in a little thingy bag. So that, I think, you know, we'll start with that. It can be a bit of splashed finish on there. All right, it's grime. We can polish that off. We'll keep that, and that can be refitted at any time. So it's a non-destructive improvement, which is a nice thing to be able to do. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we're in this weirdest of times where, you know, the problem, as I say, is that whole communities align against one or the other side of things, insisting that one is right and I'm right and the others are wrong. And of course, you know, the extreme obvious one is President Putin says that the West is a crazy warmongering set of lunatics threatening Russian security, and the West says, no, we're not, we're peace and democracy loving. And then the West says, you're the crazy, destabilizing, threatening superpower trying to encroach your way westward, and in fact accuse Putin of trying to recreate the former Soviet Union, you know, which which is something that actually kind of you can start to see how that looks. Kind of looks like that if you look at it from an angle, a certain angle. So, we're up against this thing where we seem to be, whenever we come across something like that, the first instinct we seem to have is to reach for a certainty that one is right or one or the other is right. So we take sides usually. What we're not really good at doing is permitting permitting more than one side to be right, simultaneously right. And the reason for that is maybe if you think about us as scientists, if we're used to science and that kind of thinking, scientific method, science is built around facts, or the solidest fact possible, subject to challenge and testing with the scientific method. But science likes working hypotheses which are as good a fact as you'll get within science, I guess. But it has a binariness about it, and what it really means is either the explanation accounts for the phenomenon we're looking at, or it doesn't. Now, sometimes it accounts for it in science. It accounts for it, but perhaps not fully. And we stop there and we go, well, it's the best we can do. But we never really expect it to account for it absolutely, completely. We're always prepared to accept that we may be wrong somewhere in there. But we're used to thinking that way, and so we have we get on quite well in a world where things are true or they're not. However, these geopolitical things, I'm just going to try these old reading glasses to get me a closer look at this. These geopolitical crises, they don't seem to work with black and white factual situations, because for the most part these great big complicated scenarios are a combined summary or result of many factual phenomena all coming together, things actually happening. Now, many of the little bits I suppose you could look into and go, well, that did or didn't actually happen, and then you could work from the facts to try and figure out what that means about coming to an explanation of why something happened, why a more complex thing happened. But the problem is, I think science starts with the little bits and it holds on to them, and it does its best to make sure all the way along that none of those bits gets cloudy again. So it sort of captures them and stores them and says, right, we've decided that everything under this line is proven, or experimentally proven, and then we work onwards from there. Am I not managing to get me a focus? Don't I deserve a little bit of focus? God blimey. I don't know what's happened to my iPhone. Maybe it's just too far away. Oh, come on. It's kind of conked out. So the problem we seem to be in is we've forgotten that a lot about that system or that way of thinking, and it seems like we very quickly veer off into we don't hold the known in as rigorous a way as the scientific method does. So we seem to rewrite the underpinning facts when it comes to geopolitical situations, which are very, very complex. We seem to let go of, or not have a method of holding on to the certainties at the core of it, or underneath it. So what I mean by that is that we end up basically choosing almost on a sort of article of faith. Or actually, no, it's not so much that. What we do, I think, is we quickly lose track of that which we all agreed, in science, we all agreed that, whatever a complicated thing we're talking about today, we still all basically agree that oxygen, when, XYZ, it turns into something else, blah, blah, blah. We all agree on these things. Problem with, I think, the analysis of politics and world affairs and stuff is that I actually don't think that agreement is sustained, and so everything becomes reinterpreted. There's no common ground. So every factual or every event, every statement, every occurrence is interpreted, and in a way that's what's become very commonplace in sort of daily life anyway, that everybody has their take on what the government's thing about vaccines are and so on, and so it all becomes based on feeling or intuition or belief. I believe that the West is doing this, I believe. But it's the problem is, it's probably not even that people believe, or what they often mean by belief is, I've come to the conclusion as a result of X, Y, and Z. I've come to the conclusion that this complex thing is happening, and there are probably some of these reasons and some of those reasons. People don't sort of get to that. They do anything but hold multiple conflicting readings. So there are categories or clusters. So, if you think that Putin's a crazed ex-KGB evil man attempting to recreate the Russian blah 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 Soviet Union glory, you fall immediately into the Western camp, and therefore everything Putin and Russia does is wrong, everything they have done is wrong, and there's no way to understand. They're definitely not in fear of the West and NATO and so on, because they're lying about that. It's just about expanding the empire and so on. And so there are these things are falling to one side, and I think the real issue, the problem is that we aren't. There isn't a space, it seems, or it isn't a convention to hold conflicting, complex things in mind at once. So here I'm going to start doing something that may make some people feel unhappy. But this is what we do. All right. This is what we do. So it seems to me that we're not very good at, just as a species, we're not very good at accepting conflicting things and trying to find a workable way through them. And to do that, I think you have to do something that I've always said, which is to have a higher principle above our disagreements. And that is, for me, that is our common state of humanity, our common human beingness. But unfortunately, as you can see, that doesn't appear to rise, and it never has so far risen above our viewpoint differences, shall I say. So and of course I think it would be fairly safe to say that almost everything we see in these conflict situations is underpinned by fear in some way or other. And so I tend to take Putin at his word when he talks about, when he accuses the West of, the West, he accuses NATO of, expanding or threatening him, I can look at it and say, how ridiculous. We're the most peace-loving people. We've never been in that kind of, never gone out looking for trouble, and how absurd of you to accuse us of that. It just shows how little you understand about democracy, blah, blah. And all that happens when we do that is we negate somebody else's feelings, because we've decided that they're not real. They're making them up as an excuse for whatever the thing they want to do, which we've decided is conquest of the breakaway states and so on. So it's that thing of, what it feels like when somebody decides they know better than you what your motivation is. It drives you insane, right? But that's what we're doing every day when it comes to politics in situations like this. Of course, our politicians are doing it, just as Putin's doing it, so everybody's involved in it, because it's the unenlightened way of doing it. It's the default. I'd call it the sort of animal threatened way. You're caught in the headlights and you're reacting, and you've gone into fight mode. Obviously it's a fight or flight situation, and pride won't let you flight, so you instead you kind of bristle and get ready to fight. So I think that's a pretty common thing. It's almost a universal of our kind of human carry-on, our condition. But I think the thing that would really help us would be to establish, or it would be, of course, to establish a respect for our shared humanity above and beyond, a respect for our shared humanity above all else, but also, and that you might even, I suppose that might even be what you might call humanism, respect for our common humanity. I'm just checking. Yeah, this is a curved one. Respect for our common humanity, and but that doesn't work without an acceptance or an awareness that there is no one truth on an issue, and that's really, really the big challenge, because people, that's so unfamiliar for people. I find that hard to do, and I've never met too many people who find it easy to do all the time without an extreme amount of work gone into it. So yeah, that to me is the big mistake or the big challenge we're up against, the ability to hold conflicting ideas, but also at a meta level, a meta, just meaning that when I think about the situation at hand, I don't immediately get pulled into the content, the detail, and start mistaking if you like, the story about the situation for the reality. The reality is complex, fluid, multifaceted, contradictory, disabling. I don't know, maybe in the business world they would call it, like, I think they refer to these things like that as wicked problems. But they are contradictory, they are puzzling, they are counterintuitive, and they certainly don't lend themselves to being to falling into two neat camps that can march against each other over a hill, or to drop bombs on each other. And that's this binary opposition is something that does seem to come out of the the old, whatever, the ancient brain stem thing, you know what I mean? Okay, so what we're going to do is we've got to prepare this nut to fit in here. It's going to take a little bit of work, so it's going to be an adjustable nut. So I want it to retain the curved base, which we can do, but I also want to have to take it down until at its lowest, sitting on the wood, it's sitting just low enough so that the strings rest on the first fret. That's the aim. Now right now it's too big, and that's the beauty of these things, or the interesting part about these adjustable nuts. When you see a nut fitted on a guitar, it's usually this big thing that then has some quite deep slots in it. This here, by the time we've got this in and it's sitting in the right place and ready to be raised up just enough to make the correct playing action, there'll be very little of this material left. It will be very fine. It'll be maybe another 1.5 millimeters gone from the bottom of this. So this bit does take quite a bit of time, he said, sort of jumping between maybe camera views. So let me just set you up over there so I don't have to think too much for a little while. That's a bit of a long view. Let's go to about there, shall we? So I'm going to be moving it around a bit while I get the sanding block up. So it's a very careful process. The great thing about sticking with the thing you've got from the factory pretty much means it just it's fitted, you don't have to worry about it. But if you do want to change it, if the action you've got is just fractionally too low now because we've lowered the other action, or if there's any drag or stickiness in the bone, then changing it is quite a difficult thing when it's fitted so well as the Fenders do. So my first task is to just get it down to a height, a thickness that will just drop in there, and it's quite difficult to do it absolutely precisely. You tend to cut a little bit or sand a little bit thinner towards the base. So I'm trying to tip it onto its tall edge a little bit so that we get as much even. I don't want it to tighten up as it sinks into the. We can adjust it, but I'm just trying my best to make this fit. Now the next thing I'm going to do is take off this little burr here, and I'm going to do that on the spinny thing. Just bear with me and ignore the momentary noise. I don't think I've just unplugged this. Yes, I have just unplugged this. Great. Let's replug this. Of all the things I didn't think I had unplugged, it was that one. So I'm just going to use it to take off the little tab. Okay, so that's a lot of noise for quite a small amount of removal of material. But that's just taking it down to where I want. And so the thing I'm just going to quickly check here, I'm presuming, I'm going on the basis that this is a 9.5 inch radius, which it is. And it's not compound, so it's the same all the way down. I had a funny feeling it might be compound, but it's not. So I'm going to use Bob's prototype kit that he made for me, or test rig that he made for me for sanding the bottom of nuts down at a given rate, or to a given radius I should say. And here we have one that's allowing me to do it to 9.5. Now it's I could, if I recall correctly, I could find the bits to attach it to its little holder. This could take some time. Alright, these have all got individual radii, so I expect this will be it. Let this be it. Yeah, it's 9.5. So we've got a, let's see if we can make this work in our favour. So we've got a thingy, we've got the thingies, and this comes down to there, that comes down to there, and then we want to tighten it up. I'm just guessing, my dears. Let's go to there and see what happens. Oh, it seems difficult. First of all, I can't find the right hex key, but it's not that one. So I'll throw it on the floor if I can't use it immediately in a fit of pique. So this one. So what I'm trying to do is just get this attached here in a way that gives me small amount of exposed nut that I can hold onto. That's interesting. That's actually so that's just about, oh, okay, that will go in. So now I've got the nut in place. Let's keep with my 9.5 inch one, which is that one. Put that back there. So with the aid of this cute little thing, I can now hold this and remove more of the base whilst retaining the radius, and hopefully I can do it in a way that keeps it just about square to the bottom of the nut, or right angles. Now even if it doesn't exactly, it's not the end of the world, because when I use the grub screws to raise this nut up and down, they take over they hold the nut, so the nut doesn't actually then have to touch the floor of the curved slot, which is quite cool. So technically we don't need it to be precise, but what I'm aiming for here is I'm trying to just take it down a bit to begin with, so that we start close to the right height, and it's nice if it does look tidy. If we had all the time in the world, we could probably take it down to a level where I could just seat it as a solid nut and call it quits, and we'll get it to just wear it slowly down from the bottom upwards to exactly the right height. That's very time consuming, I have to tell you. So that's quite a neat little thing. Now of course, right now, to check out progress, I'm going to have to undo this and drop the nut out, right, and then we just go over to here and check it, and it's just about fitting in nicely. I would say it's still a fraction too wide to fit, so I'm just kind of gently thinning it down, putting an emphasis on the bit I think needs just thinning down a bit, and I can feel it. It's a nice fit. It's getting stiffer in there. Now the problem with that, if I lift this up, it's perfectly seated now, but it's still going to register as too high. Beautifully seated actually, but it's a little bit too high. I need that to be lower. So whilst it's almost perfect dimensions, I'm going to put it back in here, and I'm going to tighten it back up. Now again, you can tell that I'm guessing a little bit here about the sticking outness of the thing. So a bit of a guess. Start to tighten it up, sort of eyeball it, tighten up a bit more, and it starts to bite. This bit is, as far as I get, and I think it's meant to be this way, this bit is the sort of holder bit that helps me do the do the sanding part. Just gives me something to hold on to. But actually the way I'm doing it right now, the block itself is quite good. Of course it can wobble. I haven't figured out a way yet of stopping it wobble, but eventually when it comes down to the metal, it would the plastic, it would just start to wear, and we could probably sacrifice a little bit of this material for a continued straight edge. But in the meantime, I can now kind of put some even pressure on the middle, which can take quite a bit as we go. Dust going everywhere. That's that side, that's that side. It looks pretty good. And it's, it's eyeballing it for straightness, but and then, as I say, when I get closer, I'm going to just make sure I can get it to a flat base. Now, one of the ways you could get a flat base easier is perhaps to go this way, because you can see the tilt better, but that might be a sort of finishing touch. And also you can get to the fresher bits of sandpaper on here as well. That's quite a nifty application. So again, no way of knowing other than taking it out. This would be quite time consuming to try and create a nut that you're going to fit and get exactly the right action from the drop. It's quite unlikely that's going to happen, but we're doing pretty well. Now the problem I've got to make sure is that that looks nearly right. That's nearly right too. So actually we're going down evenly. What I want is that when I'm doing these adjustable nuts, I want the nut to sit. I want the nut to sit with its grub screws fully retracted, so it's sitting on its base, its Tusq base, and I want it to sit there when it's wound, when the grub screws are wound into the nut, so they're not doing any lifting. I want the whole thing to leave the strings basically sitting just on the first fret, resting on the first fret, and then the point then is that we set the playing action by raising them just off the first fret and only as far as they need. See, now it's slightly too thin to get this spacer in. Well, maybe we can do it. Come on. I think that will do, just to hold it there. Yeah, so it's we're gonna start with the strings resting on the first fret, and we're going to bring them up using the grub screws till they're just high enough off the first fret to play the way you want them to without any excess height. And of course the way you want them to play is down to how you like it. You know, if you're a light player, you could get away with a lower first fret action than somebody who's going to be a heavy player and so on. But the great thing about this is that you get to choose it. Now the good thing too about this is because we're using the grub screws to lift the nut, it doesn't matter too much if I run slightly over. So if I now put it in and test the action, and I realise that I've possibly done, see, it's getting thinner. It's getting thinner. If I put it in now and find that it's now sitting what I might say is a fraction low, then it's great because we can just lift it up with the grub screws anyway. So now that's sitting on both frets almost exactly, but the point is it's going to be a little action over there, so we've got a bit further to go still. So this is how it works. Plenty of care and precision goes into this, because before I've finished I'm going to have to take this, and now in a minute we're going to drill some holes in it and put the grub screws in, which is always a fun part of it. I actually quite enjoy it. It's very satisfying. So it's important at this stage that I get the spacing of the nut right here, and then get this fitted in. Yeah, so I don't know about you guys out there, but right now I'm not feeling so great about where everything is. I mean, I'm feeling happy doing what I'm doing here, and I enjoy, very, very blessed to be able to do guitars and, you know, spend so much time with my wife and be in charge of when I work and all of those good things. You know, and make a living doing this. It's a really nice thing to know. But none of that really, well, it's dented by living in these times where, you know, we're hoping to try and make some sort of difference in respect of you know, global warming, and yet we're not. You know, we thought that was going to be the biggest challenge, and now we're staring at, it appears it could become, well, I know it sounds hysterical, but it could be the end of the planet, really, if this thing doesn't, if somebody doesn't see sense. And I can't be optimistic, I'm afraid, because I don't see where this jump in the way of human thinking is going to come from in the situation we're in and the time we're in. I just cannot conceive of it. I mean, we are you know, we are yeah, well, how's it going to change? How's Vladimir going to get a sudden spiritual awakening? How is the leadership of the UK and US, where are they going to suddenly realise that we need to approach this with a whole new way? I know it sounds, you might think it's idealistic and naive, but if you do, then I guess you're really saying that you're kind of admitting to yourself that you think there is the only way of solving conundrums like this, where one person wants to do bad things, is to kind of wage war, you know. And I get it that in the 20th century, you know, there's a part of me that knows full well that yes, there was a time, wasn't there, where if we hadn't have done what we did, how would have Hitler's crazy ambition ever have been curtailed? Well, I guess that's what we have to accept. We might be at that place again. I think that I don't think many people would disagree that if that's where we are, if we are kind of staring that down the barrel of a gun again, then I don't think, unlike the Second World War, I don't think there's going to be an easy out or a happy ending for anyone. Can't see how there is. You know, if it was a nuclear, ended up being a nuclear confrontation, well, you know, that's it for most of us, if not almost all of us. And even if it wasn't, or even if it was only a bit nuclear and mostly conventional, it would be so destructive, it would tip the planet right over, way beyond and into the end of climate meltdown, because it's precarious, it's almost irreparably damaged in our species lifetime as it is. Add a global war to it and you can kiss it goodbye, or kiss our species goodbye. So, you know, I am a bit on the resigned side, I am afraid. I'm not negative. I just think I think I recognise that, you know, it takes two to be enlightened enough to step back from the brink, I suppose you could say. That's one way of sort of stating it. One person being enlightened enough, unfortunately, doesn't work. It turns into a sort of one-sided slaughter, doesn't it? You know, the megalomaniac rolls over the peace-loving. Well, despite the biblical thing saying the meek shall inherit the earth, maybe they will when it's all burnt to a crisp, eh? So, what do you do? Well, I think I might have mentioned it on a previous video that I was reading recently a book by William Beveridge, written immediately after the Second World War, and he was the architect of the architect of the welfare state, or the health service? I can't remember now. I think it was the health service, but anyway, one of the key architects of it. And it's a very interesting read. It's one of those old, I don't know what you can see here. Sorry, the view is probably really boring and crap. It's one of those old, you know, fresh from the war, let's make a better world and we must win the peace type of things. But, you know, when you can get your head round the fact that they were barely out of 6 years of mass destruction of the like they'd never known, and had emerged in a world that was reshaped by nuclear threat and the Russian threat as well, which was very strong and real after that war. You know, anyway, one of the things that's really stood out for me about this, what he wrote, was that the only hope for a future peace and maintenance of a future peace would be the establishment of a United Nations powerful enough to put down any crazy expansionist nutcase, or you know, anyone breaking international law. So it was his vision was about international rule of law, and but that was maintained, absolutely clearly maintained, by an overarching United Nations force that was a policeman, excuse the gender, but you know, a police person. And I think that's quite challenging in some ways because, you know, partly you sort of say, oh, I see, nothing's changed and it's still about who carries the biggest stick. But you've got to sort of say, well, actually, maybe it's realistic, that's all it is. You know, that so far we have not seen any evidence to the contrary, you know, that nobody seems to live under the peaceful rule of law without there being a policeman, you know, and the policeman only works if you have enough force to, you know, you have enough force that the international policeman person can take action when necessary to prevent an individual expansionist taking over and doing bad things. So that's the idea behind it, and completely understandable and logical. But we never did. Well, we tried a bit of the old United Nations thingy, but it was never sustained and fully subscribed to. It was never taken seriously as the only way, and it lapsed really, and it lost its fangs. If it even ever had any. And now we have no United Nations policeman strong enough to intervene and re-establish the rule of international law, which is quite sad and worrying. So that's where it's at. But it was you could see that the people who've just been through what we haven't been through, you know, the 6 years of slaughter and destruction, they knew that it was the only way it would work on into the future, and they implored the world to make that a priority because human nature meant it was the only way that we were going to make it through. And unfortunately, humans didn't. I suppose you could say that we took our eye off it. I guess we presumed we would manage without it, or we'd form alliances, and that was the threat that they knew when Beveridge was writing that. He knew full well that you could not have law and order maintained by a single state thinking it was going to be the policeman, or alliances, axes of states, you know. And we basically fractured off into that, and nobody really paid enough attention to the risk that brought. So the end result is, when we need a policeman, a true United Nations policeman, we haven't got one. And actually, without one, we're not going to get a unified stance on Russia and its ambitions. That's a real worry. or if you like, you know, the US and or NATO and its ambitions. You know, the whole point about the rule of law is everybody has to be subject to it, or it just doesn't work. What I'm doing here is I'm just drilling the through holes to so I can do the tapping the thread through. Yeah. So that's what I feel about it right now. I suppose the answer, I mean, the big question is, as always, well, what the hell can you do about it? And there's a fatalist part of me that goes, well, nothing really. How can I influence the mentality of Vladimir Putin or, you know, the British government and its vested industrial military interests around the world? Because it sure as hell has got them, and it doesn't want to let go of them. It likes its arms industry, and you know, that's the whole principle of the United Nations, that wouldn't permit an arms industry in the way it's been. Hello, fly. You're a strange little fella. You've come out of here to pay us a visit. Are we privileged to see you? What do you think about the state of affairs? Oh, right, I see. You don't think you're going to live that long, so why are you worried? Yes, a typical selfish short-term view, I'd say. Sorry? Oh, well, yes, it is all relative, yes, it's true. Well, yeah, no, it's true, I think you're right about that. Yeah, well, I try to stay in the present moment and let go of tomorrow, because it's a concept that you imagine. It doesn't really exist. And he says worrying about it just spoils and besmirches today. He's very wise. I know you haven't got long, Mr. Fly, perched on your bit of Tusq, black Tusq nut there, camouflaged nicely. Yeah, there's my body heat, and running the heater has waken you up, hasn't it? Alright, just a little detour. It's more interesting than watching me thread this, or tap this screw hole. I had to buy a load of these little hex keys to go with these adjustable nuts yesterday, and I never remember what the grub screws are. Somebody asked me that today on a YouTube question, and at the moment I can only just about remember what the hex keys are, which is a 0.9 hex key. Oh, you've disappeared behind there. I don't want to annoy you. Come out from there. There you are. Where are you? Oh yeah. Yeah, I can just about remember the hex key is a 0.91. So what I'm doing while you're talking to the fly is I'm fitting the two grub screws into the tapped holes in the nut, and I'm just going to let them poke through, and I'm going to use them now to mark where this nut should sit in the nut slot. And I'll mark what I'll do is, when I've made those little marks, I will gently carve little dimples or pits or recesses, whatever we want to call them, which will help me prevent the nut from moving sideways. I don't really want to disturb you, Mr. Fly. We can be friends, but I don't want you to sort of fly onto me. I feel a bit queasy about that. We're friends, but we're probably not that good friends. Oh, I see. Going for a walk. Yeah, we're not that good friends. So What do you think about the workmanship involved in this? Is that quite impressive? Okay. We're going to give it a quality assurance test. Come on, I haven't got all day. I need you, no, check out the nut. The nut. Look, the nut. I don't want to freak you out or anything. I don't think you've got a lot of energy left, have you, mate? That's what I want you to just check that out and see if it's okay. Yep. Okay, let's put you somewhere else. Sorry about this. We'll just put him over there with a little gentle puff of the... I think he's gone for a fly, actually. A fly around. Right, well, as you saw, as my little flying friend introduced you, there is the adjustable nut. So what I'll do now is I will carefully get my mirror so you can see what I'm doing. Oh yeah. I'm now going to very carefully reduce the amount sticking out by a little bit. I'm going to just have the tiniest bit sticking out for now. I'm going to drop this into the slot, line it up, first of all, side to side, smoothly. Press it down like so. Then, whilst supporting the head there, headstock, I'm going to go tap and tap. And then remove. And I have two lovely little dots. Where's the other one gone? Oh, blast. Where's it gone? Really? Yeah, maybe. Yes, it is. Okay, so that, next thing I do is... Oh, he's back. I was right, he did go for a fly around, but he is definitely back. Bum, 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 bum. Right, what I'm going to do while you're chatting to the fly, Vincent Price fans will know the reference there, I'm going to dent the little holes, or press a little hole into the point I've marked, and I'm going to hand drill, in inverted commas, a little depression starting on these marks. Get that, go. And that little depression will kind of retain, just gently retain the bottom of the grub screw when the nut is in place. So these are very sort of slight depressions. Oh God, it's more the theme of the evening. Slight depressions which, when I replace the nut, and these will now, grub screws will now sit in there and stop it from moving. Wonderful. So I'm nearly ready to go, except I'm going to now wind through the if I can find the little hex key now, it's only downside of this material I'm working on is that these hex keys vanish. Oh, God. And I'm going to need a magnet to find them or something, which is pretty rubbish. So the fly is still hanging out. But I genuinely now cannot find the little hex key. Oh, for goodness sakes. Maybe it's under there. No. Maybe it's there. Sorry, little fly. This is nuts. It's not possible to lose that hex key. I didn't put it back in the box, did I? Well, let's assume I did, and I'm that silly. Thankfully, I've got a few. Let's take it out. Another one. I think I need a special magnet just for this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to push these through quite a bit. I'm going to do it if I can't see properly. I'm going to wind them in to begin with, right down to about this level here, and cut them off at that point. So I'm just going to do both the same. I'm going to cut them flush, and then I'm going to sand the bottoms of the grub screws. Ta-ta! My flying friend, wherever you've gone, may your journeys never end. Right, so let's put you back on track. Oh yeah, right, there we are. So I'm going to, there's one. Is that the same one? That's the one I just put down. They are invisible, I tell you. Right, let's use this magnet to hold it. Of course that's not magnetic, is it? Right, stick it there. Right, I'm going to get my cutters. I'm going to cut off the end of these, shorten these grub screws, I should say. 1, 2. And things are shorter now, and what I want to do is sand these down. Now, I could either do it by keeping them inside the nut. Actually, it's probably the best way to do it. I'm going to just withdraw them so they're just sticking out a little bit, and I'll use the same little device to gently sand them smooth, because I don't want these grub screws digging in to the maple of the neck if possible. So I'll start with, get my little thing back out. There it is. That's one. That's the only one. Still lost one. Right. So what I'll do is, just to get these sanded down, I can either, for the purpose here, drag it by hand, and I can hear it filing on the metal, which is fine. So the target is to just flatten those feet off so they're not sharp. And we're getting there. Once I've done it a little bit, then just dial through a tiny bit more and sand a bit more. I think when we're close to the right place, then it would probably make sense to, instead of going long ways like this, we can just do it across the grain like that, just to make sure that we flatten those off. Okay, they look, this one needs a little bit more work. And probably a little bit more. Nearly there, come along you. We're almost there. So you might be saying, God, this takes so long, this nut business. And I would say, yes, you're right, it certainly does. But to have a nut that behaves so well and performs so well is priceless in a way. And my focus on the nut really was the first kind of obsession for me in guitar setting up in. Okay, that's two smooth feet. Now, with the feet, where can you see? What can you see? Right, the feet. There's two little holes, dimples in there. So what I'll do is, to start the whole thing up, I will wind the feet just that little bit outwards so they're not in play at all. And I will get them out of play. Line it up in the slot, which I know will line up with the grub screws on the little holes. Press it in there like that. Right, that's a really snug fit. Now when the strings are on that, that's going to pull down flat. So I know I'm going to fret level, so while I'm at it, I'm going to very carefully thingy-me, marker pen the frets. Now as I do this, the words USA Fender and maple and gloss poly come to mind, and I have had issues in the past, not many, but I've had issues with maple and gloss finishes where, for no very good reason, but due to some batch problem and the adhesion between the wood and the finish, it has flaked off just like that. And every time I do one of these, I just simply have to pray to the gods of guitars that it isn't that infamous batch or the infamous material they used. Because if it is, well, there's nothing we can do about it. If we're going to do fret work, which involves masking off the frets, then we're going to have to pay the price. Now, like I say, all I can do is hope for the best outcome. So right at the moment, I'm trying to find my way to get just the G string into action. Now, the reason I'm putting this one first is because I want it to hold down the nut. So I'm going to run the thing around. Now, I don't really need all the wires wound on this, but so I could afford to just cut it a bit shorter at this time, because we're just putting the strings on to get the neck under load for fret leveling. But okay, so there's the G string. Yes, sitting on the first fret, just as I wanted. So the next part of it is to take care of the tethers. So that's a nice looking nut. I'm happy with that. It's how it feels the biz. Neatly fitted, snug, won't fall out even when the strings come off. But as a rule, what I suggest is that when you put strings on, you put the middle ones or the G, and if nothing else, the G on first. Hold it down, or the D. Hold it in place, and then it will stop it running the risk of leaping out and going anywhere. The question as to whether some staggered tuners, I found, do just about create enough break angle to work. There are some I've used before that just don't quite seem to make it, and I don't think that's on Fenders, but on other guitars I've seen, it's a good idea, but it hasn't quite made it. I've had to add a string tree to do the job, but it won't be in this case, I don't think. So here we are loading up the guitar, and I can feel the start point's great. The strings are all on the first fret, which is where we want them. And of course the reason for that is just simply so that we can go upwards to the preferred action from there, and that's the only lift we have to do. And the reason I go to all this trouble with these adjustables, one of the main benefits actually, which I forgot to mention, is that in doing so, what it allows me to do is to set up the excuse me, just finding a thingy cutters, I hope. Where have they gone? There they are. Yeah, yes, using the adjustable nut means that rather than fit a nut and then cut downwards to give the exact correct first fret action, because in my book the first fret action precision is not negotiable. That's the fact. So however I get to it, it has to happen. Now in the past I would have filed at it until it happened, but now the purpose of the adjustable nut is to make sure that I can get the exact first fret action, but I can do it by lifting the slots up to the correct action instead of cutting them downwards. And that this string doesn't like going on because it wants to curl over and scrape the finish, which I don't want it to do. That's the problem with reusing strings. They almost always default to trying to scrape your finish. Yeah, so you get what I call the unmolested fret nut slots of the Tusq, and that plus the pre-lubricated Tusq material is the perfect setup for me. It's as good as you can get in terms of stability. Now I seem to have managed to unhook that little hex key, and God almighty, I actually lost the one I just had out. This is nuts, isn't it? There's my magnet, and I have misplaced it. I'm going to end up finding a dozen of these, but this is crazy. I knew I shouldn't have used this piece of work. There it is. Okay, so that little panic aside, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift without the strings being under tension. I'm going to dial in the hex grub screws a little bit on either side, and I'm going to gently raise up the nut until such times as it's giving me the clearance I want. Now, as it begins to lift, of course it's going to very slightly compress the wood to begin with, but I found that that sort of evens out very, very quickly in the workshop. And of course, if it were ever to do that, I've only ever noticed it do it tiny amount. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I've never noticed it do it on any of mine, but a customer had it once that they said that they felt it had settled a little bit, and which, of course, the cure to that was to do this. Tiny little lift. There we go. And it looks good at the other end at the moment. So at the moment I'm just looking to get the guitar into strung, tensioned mode so we can do the fret leveling, which is next. Now I've noticed while I've been doing this there is some fret wear down at this end which we could take care of as well. Yes. Let's check how we're standing. Right, we've got a little gap at either end where the nuts are raised up, which is what we expect to find. That's good. All in order. So I'm going to stretch one more time, and then we'll get on. We'll check the action height a little bit more on the bottom end, I think. Actually, it's not bad. And then we'll get going with the fret leveling. Lovely. Right, off we go into fret leveling mode. Now, the beauty of fret leveling mode is that it's a tried and tested method. We're not going to need to do much here, but I will expect to see the problem quickly reveal itself. So this method, it's a favoured method of mine I've been doing now for years, and no reason to change it, no desire to change it. It works the way I like, and it allows me to diagnose what's going on with the neck pretty well. Now that diagnosis is a skill that comes with using this for a long time, but it's not about some particular sophistication of the machinery. It's about being able to read it and knowing what it says. Now, interestingly, this truss rod never quite goes totally flat. It's just the way it was built, so it has to have just enough there. Right, we've just got enough. Excuse me, I think the flies just try to escape into my mouth. It's just bendable enough to match this fretboard, fingerboard, so that's cool. So start off, I've calibrated to the first fret. I'm going to, first track, and I'm now going to do my first pass with the truss rod, and I'm expecting to see a fairly level, even cut, but what I also expect to see is some congestion up by the 10th, 11th, 12th fret. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Now that congestion could be the result of high frets, so frets that are higher than the surrounds because they're not seated properly, or it could be that the ones before it are in a ditch pit. But actually looking at this tells me that the calibration's right, because pretty much all the frets are getting touched or cut except that one, which is low compared to all of them. So that's a single low fret, could be just a very slight dip. We do have higher frets cutting more around about here, so that is what we expected. It's not so much a problem on this side. We're going to find it really sharp on this side, but we can kind of anticipate a little glut. And at this end here, right on the end, there's a drop off on the final fret, which again may have been put in deliberately by the manufacturer as a sort of fall away. Let's just see how much fall away it is. So a very gentle leveling process here. Just kind of gets everything where I want it to be. And yeah, just beginning to touch this fret now, so it's just bottomed out that low spot. So I think that's probably all we need to do on that track. So we just test it. Good. We'll do the B using the same calibration as the E track, which is traditional for me. So once I've done this leveling, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the strings, and then we will recrown, oh sorry, I'll mask off the neck with my fingers crossed, and then once I've masked the neck, then I will recrown the frets to make sure that any flat spots that have been introduced due to this leveling process are rounded out. So we do have a little low spot here and then a high cluster around there, as we kind of knew, but everything else there's a little bit of a high spot showing up here as well, and you can often tell that by a little bit of fret dust that builds up. And there's very little at the moment, I have to say, comparatively little. So I'm just concentrating and keeping an eye on the little fretware dips, grooves, and I'm just taking almost all of those away. Now when I say almost all of those, is I don't tend to like to take away fret metal in pursuit of just removing visual grooves that don't really affect play, because you're trading out fret metal and it's an expensive thing to do. So what I'm sort of looking at here is I'm leveling first and foremost for the playability, and then what I also will just pay attention to is just, if I can, within the same leveling, can I get rid of the wear grooves, just to clean up the way it looks. And we've definitely got a low spot developing around about here. Everything else is cutting sort of predictably, but yeah, we're in a low little dip now here in the middle part. So even as it's changed, it wasn't showing, it was a bit there, it was okay there, but now these two frets in the middle have joined this fret being a bit low. So it's funny how it goes. The shape isn't consistent all the way across, but the great thing about this method is it's very revealing. A little bit of zizz you're hearing there is because they're in that dip. I'll just do a tiny bit more leveling there, only a tiny bit more. See if we can, see if we do bottom out that dip with this, but if we don't, that's fine, we'll move on. Whether we do or don't bottom it out at this point is my indication of how big the unevenness is, and in fact that's just about leveling it out now, so I'm kind of okay with that. So we're moving now onto the D track and calibrating for that. As I say, the relief curve does change across the, now this is, I need to add a little bit more curvature in here, a tiny bit. And it has changed a fraction from the other side, or the treble edge, so that's just about right. So a tiny bit more curvature as we come this way. But it's hard to imagine because it's obviously it's flaring a bit, and it's more flatter over that side. It's a sort of bit of a three-dimensional puzzle to try and visualize it, but it obviously, the neck doesn't bend and shape in exactly the same uniform way across all the dimensions. Now I'm definitely picking up this low spot here, It's not that bad. We're kind of bottoming it out with a little bit of a push, but it's kicking up a little bit of cost in metal either side to get it out. But that little group there will be hindering this low action play, which is quite interesting. But again, this amount of dust is nothing. I feel like the Apollo. Very good. Getting a bit noisier now on the A, and then more noisy on the low E. So hopefully what you'll be able to see is once I've got past the A and on into the E, you'll hear that E clean up. That's the aim. But we recalibrate each one as we go. Okay, so now recalibrating on the A, which is just about spot on still. Flipping the string off. Yeah, so the fly did tell me. He said, Sam, he said, you've read a fair bit of Eckhart Tolle type stuff, and you are, he said to me, he said, you and I both are very much in the present moment as much as we can be. He said, me, because I only live a tiny amount of time and I don't have actually any consciousness with which to make sense of my existence, so I'm condemned, he said, to living in a permanent state of ever-present now. And he said, technically I can't really be telling you this, and I fully appreciate that, so I feel very honoured. But he said, you on the other hand, he said, you've got consciousness, and that's your curse really, because it's constantly making you remember and regret past, and constantly obsessing about the future, he said. He said that as a result, you suffer all the time because you make the past and the future, because you know of them, you make them into reasons to suffer, to be in pain. And I thought it was very profound for a short-lived fly, but probably very true. Okay, so I'm expecting to need to work this little area here on the 11th and the 12th. Oh, there he is. Hello, friend. I expect if I were to hold my hand up, you'd do one of those freaky things like land on it, and everyone would go, oh no, it's spooky. Like somebody posted on Facebook a couple of babies parked by a fence in a railings of a fence in a park, and still, okay, so it's the 12th, sorry, it's the 12th fret that's the problem, not the 11th. So we've got to just concentrate on this 12th fret a bit more. Yeah, so these two little kids were wheeled up to a fence, and one of them had a sandwich or something, and the robin came down and kept trying to, every time the child gleefully put his hand out, its hand out, the robin made to like land on it, and it wasn't always the child, or it wasn't the child with the sandwich, it was the other child, but the robin seemed very keen to sort of land on them, and then of course the people, somebody who posted it had decided it was all about a deceased grandmother coming back, because some people believe that robins or birds landing on you are harbingers of the other world. It's not perfect, but we are extremely low. In its defense, we are at just 1.5. I'll do a tiny bit more on that 12th fret anomaly. Sounds like a sci-fi thing. I'm going up to see the 12th fret anomaly. Take care. a little bit more light, gentle light work on that 12th fret spot, and then we'll call that quits. Now in the process of this, I think I've got rid of most of the fret wear. I might just give it another little zip on the G track, and just try and lose a little bit more. So we had, I think we had a kind of email exchange, Aaron and I, about, you know, he didn't know whether, he wasn't getting on, he felt he wasn't getting on with these frets, so he didn't know whether to think about refretting this or not, and it's entirely possible. And I said, well, my advice was, why not see how this feels. We'll get, I'll eke out or free up the these choky bits and buzz, get the action lower, get the nut fitted, and see what you make of it. And then if you don't like the frets, then, you know, we'll look at changing them another day. Or he was thinking about a replacement neck, which again is a total possibility. Okay, my instinct tells me that's enough. So we have done everything. That's the precision fret leveling part done, whilst chatting on about flies and the end of the world. But so in a way, in that sort of conversational process, we've set the nut where we want it, we've set the action down here where we want it, and we've made the neck or the frets comply with that new chosen low action. And that's really a way, a good way of thinking about the setup that I do, is that when we were younger, we all had guitars that had terrible playing actions and you know, hurt our fingers and so on. And you know, the truth about all of those guitars is that we lowered the actions until the notes choked, and then we basically stopped lowering it or backed off a bit and played them and lived with it. And so it would be fair to say that for most of our playing younger years, the actions on our guitars were dictated to by the condition of the frets. And what I do with this setup, there we go, that looks good. What I do with this setup is I make the we choose the action that we want, and then we make the frets comply with that, fall in line with that. So it's a sort of difference, but of course you can see that it takes quite a lot of effort, including the fret leveling. And of course the fret leveling is the key thing. You see lots of people offering setups very cheaply, and that's fine, you know, if you want your neck oiled and, you know, strings changed or whatever. But when somebody brings a guitar and wants a different a better playing action, they never want it back with the same playing action. They want a better one, and to get a better one, I have to level the frets 99% of the time. It's almost universally the case, because all guitars leave the factory with uneven frets, unless, and I'm not even convinced about this, but you know, I don't want to get into arguments with people, but unless they go through what's called the Plec machine, which is this computerized science fiction machine for assessing and fixing, microscopically, computerizedly fixing the frets. Anyway, to be honest, I've seen some guitars come through, had that had done, and they still needed some fret leveling work. Now, you know, you could say, well, who do you think you are to think you're right and the Shrek is wrong, Plec is wrong? Well, I don't know, but you know, whenever I've leveled after somebody's had a Plec thing done, we will have some buzz or choke on a certain note, on a certain low action, and then I'll do the extra bit, the added bit with my system, and then the note will play, or the bend will free up and play. Now, I don't really know enough about what the Plec machine does to know whether it does everything that this method does, and although this is very low tech in a sense, one of the advantages, or one of the key things about this, is that because it does this with the strings, does the leveling with the strings on, it means that the neck is not only curved a little bit, in this case not much because I haven't really done too much curvature, we kept it fairly straight, which is, I know, I suspect the way Aaron would want it, because that's how it came, but yeah, so we've kept the neck with a little bit of relief, but in its playing condition, and we kept the strings on, so that it's not only curved, relieved, but it's also compressed in that direction, in the way that the strings pull the tuners in towards the body and the body towards the tuners. So it's got an extra dynamic, I suppose you could call it, of longitudinal forces acting on the neck. And it seems to me, and I didn't know this, or this didn't strike me until I'd noticed the results of using that method, and it had to be explained somehow, and it seemed to me that I'd seen other people, again, I haven't seen the innards or the precise details. What I've seen is people demonstrating the Plek machine who are disciples of it, and they're not, I haven't heard any of them being critical of it or explain it in a way that takes into account everything that I would consider vital to take into account. So it made me question how much they knew in a day-to-day hand tool sense of it. But anyway, the point being is that I've not seen an explanation of the Plek machine that convinces me that it is. I get this. I have a feeling that it seems to me that they sample each fret when it's all in order, but I don't think they do it with the strings actually on. I think they do it. I think they measure the curvature of the neck with the strings on, and then I'm not sure if they rebend the neck with the jig in the machine and then map the frets with the strings out of the way. But in a sense, one of the things I noticed, and I could be wrong, but it's just a thought, that I don't think bending the neck is the same as bending it and compressing it, or bending it through compressing it, because the only reason this neck bends is because it's being pulled together, and it can't squish together, so it compresses, but it also bends upwards. And so it feels to me that unless your method or your jig or your Plek or whatever it is, unless that thing actually creates the compression that's at play when your guitar is under full load of stringing, then it can't be making exactly the same. And I think the difference between the additional bits I found myself leveling out on pre-Pleked guitars, I think that's the difference between a curved neck being worked on with the laser beams and whatever, and one that is curved and compressed, which I know for a fact from my own experience makes a difference. That compression moves the frets out of alignment a little tiny bit more, and that's enough to reintroduce a bit of unevenness. So it's a bit like how I explain it when people take the strings off, slacken the neck, take strings off, relieve the tension on the neck, flatten the neck out with a ruler and the truss rod adjustment, and then go at it with a leveling file beam and a rocker thing, to get all the frets dead level relation to each other. Now, I can tell you is that that's better than not doing it. It's far better than not doing it. In fact, it's a much, much better way than not doing it at all. But it seems to be the case that because you're in that method, you are creating a set of frets that are perfectly level relation to each other when the neck is at peace, at ease, at rest. What seems to happen is the minute you put the neck under load and it reintroduces the compression or the effects of compression along with the neck, those frets that were a minute ago when the neck was relaxed, the frets that you got level suddenly aren't level. They are slightly out because the compression part, which wasn't there when you leveled the frets but now is back in play, that seems to throw the frets a little bit out, and it seems to be enough to make a difference. And I think that could be a slight difference between this sort of handcrafty method, but this method that does the leveling with the neck under compression, and the one without. I think that could well be the difference between the two, or account for the difference in a little extra bit of leveling that I seem to need to do on those plecked jobbies. Anyway, long-winded old thing, but so yes. So it's been a funny couple of weeks, because I think a week ago Friday, well, that would be 2 weeks ago on Friday now, but yeah, 2 weeks ago on Friday I think I might have mentioned, went to band practice and ran over a very large manhole support stone, something part of the surrounds of a manhole cover. Anyway, it punctured the sidewall of my tyre, and that was me stuck. So I had to spend a lot of the weekend waiting for AA out in the country to come and rescue me, and I had to pay £100 to upgrade so they would rescue me back to my preferred garage, which was, I think we had home start, and actually what we needed is far off recovery to a garage of your choice, or a location of your choice, and we didn't have that part of it enabled. Didn't realise we didn't, but we didn't. Anyway, so that meant I had to pay £100 to get them to come and get me, which is okay, fair enough. To what do you call it? That thing, upgrade effectively. So we upgraded there and then. But as they said, oh, and by the way, your car is out of MOT. And we'd not seen any notices, and it just passed us by. We were about 2 days out of MOT. Anyway, so that was kind of lucky. So they had to come and recover the car anyway, because they said with it being out of MOT, we are not allowed to send our guy and get you back on the road. We have to take you, which in a way ultimately saved me a couple of wasted hours, because instead of waiting for a guy to come kick the tyres and go, no, got to call a recovery truck, he came straight away, because it was a recovery deal from the very outset, which was fine by me. Anyway, so then I got it into the MOT last Monday. Was it Monday? Yeah, and it failed. And it failed on what seemed like big things at the time. And the guy was, oh, no, it's failed on the, what did he say? The back could be really expensive. You know, didn't take a breath and all that. And he said the rear seat belt, central seat belt, isn't working. It won't pull out and it won't withdraw. I was like, oh my God. And he said, if we have to take that apart, he said that's, you know, a brand new one will be hundreds from Honda, and you know, it'd take us hours to figure it out, and then we'd have to get one from Breakers, which could be £50, and might not be the right one. And anyway, it started to look really crappy. And then he said the other thing was that the headlights were misaligned, and the covers, outer lenses were clouded and not clear enough. So I said, well, you were the ones who put the bulbs in for me last time, guys. At which point they suddenly said, oh, that's no problem, we'll sort that out. And they're very good, actually, most of the time, but I think that caught them out. So I had to go away and try to fix the seatbelt business myself. And I had no idea whether I could do it or not, but I thought, this can't be so difficult. So I went home and waited a day or so, climbed into the back of the car with a screwdriver, took the little plastic sort of restrainer bit off the top and give it a look, as you do, kicking the tyres type of thing. And actually, it turned out, amazingly, that I managed to get it going, because it doubled over right down inside the thing, and it was just stuck. So obviously I had a bit more time to play with it, so I was thrilled that I saved myself maybe £150 on time and parts fitting a new one of those. I got the lenses cleaned up, and then we put it in on Monday, just gone, for the MOT, and it was done by the end of the day. And it was actually in total £90. and I got asked them to put on a new pair of wiper blades, but it was incredible. It was so much cheaper than we'd been bracing ourselves to face. So it's not often that you get a great outcome like that, but this was one of them. Okay, so before I take a break and have a drink and do the sanding bit off camera, I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do here, which is the, oh my god, really? Have I been looking at such a crap view all this time? Oh, sorry. I'm going to show you that I am recrowning the frets. So we've leveled them off a little bit in the process of leveling them. We've made flat spots on some of them where it's worn away the fret a little bit. That's what happens. That's how you level them. So it's important to go over them once you've done that, and using this concave diamond coated file to gently reshape them and recreate the sort of arch form instead of leaving any flat spots. And that's what I'm doing here. So what's interesting too is when you're at this stage, you can tell by how long I might spend on a fret at this part of the process as to how much work the fret leveling did on that fret. And you can see these two required quite a bit of leveling. And also what's happening is this recrowning tool is riding over the clear lacquer on the side of the fret, so it is an oversprayed fret, as I predicted. It's like you can feel it. It's like skating over ice when you encounter a coating of lacquer like that, or poly, I should say. It's not a problem. This thing kind of cuts it away quite nicely, but anything where the lacquer comes up the side, it has a potential to crack. Which is why I don't like it as a method. It's the quickest way of spraying a neck. I prefer to spray the neck, clean the slots, then put the frets on, because that way I know that the frets are sitting on the finish, not the finish going over the frets. Little flakes of the carpet of finish are coming off. But hopefully none of it will extend anywhere else other than, well, I'm not taking off anything other than what's on the side of the frets, which is what I could see before, that little flecking I was telling you about. That's what I was seeing quite a lot of. I can see it now. Quite a lot of this amber finish has collected on the sides of these frets. So, that's a slight risk. That's partly why I get nervous, because their choice to finish the neck that way means somebody working on the frets later on may be caught in a trap not of their own making, from which they can't really hope to escape. So if this cutting of these little bits, I don't know how well you can see them, little flakes breaking off here, those, if they break anything else off and take it with them, then there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just trusting that it isn't usually the case. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll do the sanding afterwards, and then when that's done I will remove the tape, probably off camera, because I couldn't bear it if any of the finish came up with it. Like I say, it's very rare, but it has happened, and there's nothing that the tech or the luthier can do about it. It's a flaw, occasional flaw in some of Fender's process, and I don't know I can't tell you what the scope of the years it applied to or the models and stuff. I just know that when I can least afford it to happen, it's happened once or twice, which is a horrifying prospect, and it means I've had to completely refinish the necks from the ground up, which is a terrible expense to me, because it's not really something I feel I can charge the customer for. It's not their fault that Fender, nor is it mine, and Fender aren't going to pay me. So anyway, I'm going to go off and sand this now, and then we'll be pretty much ready for the clean up, restring, tweak the pickups into position. I think we're nearly there. So this is the starting to roll downhill. So see you in a short while. Okay, here we are. I don't know why I got the screen on this. It's probably because it's night time. Well, it's taken on a bit of a funny colour cast. I hope it's okay. Anyway, cleaned, polished. Thankfully, all the finish stayed on, looking great. All the wear gone, everything's ready. There's the two little dimples in the slot to hold the nut in place. So I'm going to concentrate right now on getting the strings on. We'll replace the nut when I've got the strings in, and then we shall get it all up to speed. And then it'll be home. Now my plan is I shall pack it in the morning now, and I shall book a drop-off, and I'll take it to the post office because I've got to go there anyway. And the good thing about that is that I found out last week that the parcels don't go anywhere until 7 o'clock anyway, so there's no problem. As long as you can get them down there in the daytime, they'll comfortably go the same day, and it'll be 24 hours, so it will get there on Friday. Yay! So I'm just going to restring. So the next thing to take care of is the restringing part, and this is where I always talk about the tuning stability, because it's so important to. The one thing I've learned after years of doing this, well, one of the things I've learned is that tuning stability, whoops, wrong hole. Tuning stability is contrary to what a lot of people think. It doesn't have anything to do with the tuners, which is a counterintuitive, weird thing. But I found that tuning stability is down to two primary factors, and for the sake of argument, I call them 50% each. 50% of it is down to the condition of your nut. So obviously bad is slots that grip, material that drags, pinching, so on and so forth. So that's obviously bad. And good is perfectly sized slots, material that's pre-lubricated, and so on and so forth. So hence I use Tusq. Now, where's the nut gone? Just pick this up, and there it is. Yeah, so that's why I use Tusq. So, I'm just wondering something. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so if 50% is getting the nut right, you want to go for material that is self-lubricating or readily lubricated, and of course Teflon or PTFE or whatever this stuff is, the variant of that that's in Tusq, is very slippy. It's a great start, so highly recommend Tusq. To make sure that the slots are not compromised, don't compromise the strings moving. Do what I do, which is why I spend as much time as possible on making sure that I get them up to the correct operating height without scratching them with files and having to do any of that cutting. So that's a really important thing. So that's 50% of it, getting the right nut and the right material, and getting it so you get your first fret action right, and the strings have no drag going through the slots. The second 50%, if you like, is getting rid of all the unreleased slack in your strings before you play. And I often get people commenting saying, oh, can't I just give it a couple of turns, a couple of pulls, and leave it overnight and it'll settle in? No is the answer. My experience says that there's more slack in there than you think, and it will continue releasing itself very slowly over the years and annoying you at every possible turn. So it just doesn't let itself out. You need to proactively do it. Now I just want to show you a secret to the tuning. Oh no, what are we telling us now? Have we run out of memory? No battery. Can't I? I can do it. Let me go and plug this in. This is useless. Can't do a whole video before the battery runs out. Quick! Can't use the microphone. Switch over. Battery only. No mic. Hold on. Oh, it is all over the place. Where am I going? Actually, no. I should be doing this. Sorry. Right. Not the best changeover in the world. For some reason that just didn't work. So I can't show you how I wind it on now, but anyway, you'll see it on all my other videos. But it's the simple way of putting the string all the way on, pulling it all the way through, holding it at the first fret while it's taut, pulling it back 1 fret, winding it on whilst holding taut to the held one, direct it over the loose one on the first time round, and as it comes round the second time, yank up the loose one and direct the held one underneath that, keeping it under tension the whole time, and then let it fall in the slot. And that will give you the smallest reasonable amount of coils around the tuning post, and that's just a good help towards this business of getting rid of all your slack. It's a good start. But the stretching out business, it really doesn't happen quickly. You have to keep going until your guitar doesn't detune any further. Now, a lot of people give up on this because if your nut is not right, as in it's not the right material, and the strings aren't going through the thing freely. The problem will be you may have stretched out all the slack, but your guitar's still going out of tune. So you kind of give up, and in fact you haven't stretched out all your slack, if you get what I mean. Because you'll never get it in tune. I'm just looking at this screw I fitted. It's the right type of screw, but it's a little bit shaggy. You might want to find a better one of the same size. It's perfectly functional. It's just a little bit old, I notice here, but it's not going to do any harm. I would happily include the other one, the original one that came with it. You can use if you're happy with the Tusq string tree. I'll put the other screw in, but you may want to just watch it and be careful as it goes in that it's not oversized. So I'll just put one of these from the Tusq string tree compartment in there. I'll put a short one and a tall one just in case. But I wouldn't worry too much. It's the size that's about right. I don't think you should have any problem, but you can change it if you prefer. And the original is in there as well, original string tree. Yeah, so yeah, I think it's very difficult to trust the business of stretching out the slack unless you've minimized the other place where the detuning occurs. Because I think I guess what I'm trying to say is that if it's your nut that's putting it out of tune, some people give up trying to stretch out the slack because it doesn't seem to be changing. If you take care first of the nut part, then you do the stretching bit, what you'll notice is that before long the stretching starts to stay in tune. Sorry, the angle's crap from here. You just have to try and do it the best we can. Run up to the end here. I'm just doing a first stretch to get everything carefully bedded on, and then we'll tighten from there. And what I'll do is I'll just use a tuning fork just to get roughly in the region. all in tune. So the first thing I recommend you do is you grab hold of yonder string and press between thumb and forefinger to stretch out the string as much as you can. And this will detune the guitar again, be sure of it, but it will take a lot of the slack out. What you find is that the plain strings will stabilize first, and of course you've also got to be cautious as you're bending them because you don't want to pop them. What I noticed about this guitar is that the positioning of the strings are strange, a little bit strange to my eye on the barrels, of the titanium barrels, just because I don't know if it's the barrels themselves are leaning one way towards the outside edge here, and maybe there's not quite enough space for them. Maybe there is a spacing. They just seem to be diverging a little bit, which pushes the E string outwards a little bit, which could be what Aaron was talking about earlier on, about the E string feeling like it's going to slip off sometimes. And if you're going to change that, you have to bring everything in a bit. But the problem is you don't actually have a lot of room. There's also notches already formed, so you can try and move them, but the spacing is limited by the string being up against this screw. That's defining the whole thing. So quite honestly, we don't have a lot of leeway where things go. We can do a little bit of adjustment to there, but that's about as good as it can be. But you know, some of these are notched a little bit already and maybe not in the right place. Look how much that detuned. So obviously you can hear much more detuning on the bass strings. We'll get those straight right out now, and so we should stabilize them very soon, and a few more tugs here and there. So I think if there's any issue, Aaron, with the spacing, I suspect the alignment is good. The neck is in the right place, which is sometimes unusual for USA Fenders. They can often be like that. I think it's in the right place, but I do think the spread of these are just a little bit wide. And that's because they don't have any notches, and there's no fixed thing, and they sort of settle where you've left them settle, which I don't know how much they're going to want to move from there now. That's not the right way of putting it. They've settled where they will. Regardless of whether that makes life difficult for you. Right, I'm just going to now stretch a little bit, standard pulling, last bit of yanking. Now I'll tune it up here. Look at the relief on here. Very, very flat. Right, now just double check everything. See where we're at. 1.5 dead on, 1.2 barely. That's quite low. I'll just tweak this. No, not with that. I won't remember. I'll tweak it very slightly. Right, one last thing to do. I'm going to tweak the, well, I'm going to tweak I'll tweak the pickups. Well, it's a difficult one. The balancing of pickups is a highly subjective thing, and it's down to what you like, and if you've got two pickups, how they relate to each other in their terms of their output. And the problem is that there isn't really a given thing, and it's pointless pretending there is. It's down to personal taste. All I can say, Aaron, is that the principle that people work by is that the further away the I found the other hex key, yay! The further away the pickup poles are from the strings, the quieter, the lower the less the output, but the more dynamically nuanced the sound is. That's what the word on the street says. I don't want to. Why did I get that? I don't want to do that. I want to get the tuner brain off. Yeah, and the converse is true, and that is that the closer the pickups are to the strings, the higher the output usually, but the less the tonal dynamic of the sound that comes out. So it really is down to personal choice within that constraint. Obviously, it's also slightly influenced by the relative power of these two things, and that, I'm afraid, has to be a choice thing. When I played it, it felt pretty balanced to me, because I suspect you've already worked to get it roughly balanced in this way. But again, I'd recommend you experiment with going up or down in different settings on your amp until you find a tone that you like. And obviously it might be a quieter on the output front, but it might be a sweeter tone that you prefer. And I think unless you experiment with it, you won't really know. So I'm just going to, it's a little bit difficult because of where the jack plug is in this. I tend to try to just stand it up there. I expect this to be done all right, actually. Yeah, that's 1, 2, 3. Let me just look at this. What have we got? We've got forward, back, back, forward, back, back. Yeah, it's approximations. That's a little bit askew, that G. But it's balanced between the two fixed, pre-compensated positions. I think that's as good as we're going to get with the 3 pairs of staggered compensated saddles. But there we go. Yeah, it's the only place you've got room to alter, and I do think there is a gap. I think what you've got, I'm just going to do a measurement. What you've got at the back here, it's difficult to be exact, you've got a sort of centre to centre, let's say 42 mils, and this is extended further, so it is spreading out. Without a doubt, it's spreading out. So without taking these screws out and measuring it exact, maybe you can see, let's have a quick look under the influence of charging. What I'm getting at is the space here between here and here is slightly smaller than the space, so they're spreading out because these aren't actually fitting quite properly. So I don't know if these saddles really suit this ashtray tin, because it's forcing them to diverge sideways, and as a result it's spreading the strings just a fraction more than they need to. So I would look at that, Aaron, if I were you, and see if you can research exactly what string spacing these really were for. It's not that you can't move the strings around on. The fact is that you don't want them to be pushing outwards to begin with. Because this has ended up, this B string has ended up right on the screw, and you can't do anything else with it. And actually this should be, if I could demonstrate, this whole one should be in more like that, because this needs to be slightly fractionally narrow on each one. That needs to be more perpendicular to the back of the tin, the ashtray. And if so, this screw here would be further this way, which would not be conflicting. And I think that, to be honest, I think that is an indication that it is slightly off. It's the key. You see that? That shouldn't be. It's the only way it can be with the saddles in this bridge at the moment. But there's no way that should be as close to that as it is. But if you didn't have it there, you would be pushing this string far over to there to avoid it. And so instead of trying to fix it that way, and I can tell you that's in the right place, the whole of the neck is fitted correctly. What's not right are these. I don't know whether they're upmarket, aftermarket. I can't remember. Didn't see whether this guitar came with them, but they're slightly too big. That's all I'm going to say on it. And it's forcing the strings a little bit too wide. So if you've got a problem with the fingers going off the edge, that's something to consider. You may need to go back to a correctly fitting brass version. All right, well, listen, sorry about the sound dropout or the change of camera positions and stuff. I don't know how to get round this battery not lasting long enough, but thanks for sticking with us, and I'll see you back again soon for another one. Take care.